So we've moved from our position under the stairs when we were doing our interviews earlier, and here we are in this sort of very posh, loungy area with Matt Johnson and Dan Mooney, and we've just had a really intense hour upstairs with Ruth Dugdale as well, talking about male suicide. And so if you could introduce yourselves and say a little bit about each of your books, that's probably the best way to start for our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm Matt Johnson. I loosely describe myself as an accidental author, in that I came into writing rather late in life and with no actual intention of becoming a writer. I've written 2 books now, both crime thrillers. First one, Wicked Game, second one, Deadly Game, published by Render. And I'm currently working on my 3rd one, titled To Be Revealed.
Ooh, exciting.
I'm Dan Mooney. I guess, I'm not as accidental as Matt, but I kind of stumbled into this as well. My first book is called Me, Myself and Them, which has just been picked up by an imprint of HarperCollins for distribution in the States next year. And my second book, which I think I'm going to title A Rock and a High Place, is due out in April of next year. I'm mostly an air traffic controller before I'm a writer, but hopefully at some point I could give the day job the heave-ho and just concentrate on writing.
Oh, that's what we all long for,
Yes.
isn't it?
So both of you write about kind of mental health from the point of view of men. And I know, I suffer with depression, and I feel it's a lot easier for me as a woman to find help for mental health, depression, anxiety. You don't feel strange going to the doctors and saying, please, can you help me? There isn't so much of a stigma attached to women with mental health problems as there is with men. Why do you think that is?
I think in my case, I deal with it from the point of view of a character who's within the police service. And he suffers post-traumatic stress issues. Mental health problems is a depressive type illness. And he masks it, hides it, keeps him to himself, even from his family, who are aware there's something wrong with him. And it's only when he is involved in some particularly harrowing terrorism-type incidents that a family liaison officer appointed by MO5 to work with the family, because they've been the subject of a terrorist attack, works with the wife, and between them they start to provide some support for the character himself. He's in a situation where he is ill, and they are trying to help him and help him to get back to work, and to persuade the police hierarchy that he is somebody who can be worked with, because it is a fact that when policemen suffer from mental illness, regardless of what the cause and what kind of mental illness it is, that your colleagues tend to distance themselves from you. And it does tend to queer your pitch to some extent with regards to your opportunity for promotion or to work in specialist departments. As soon as it's known that you've had a mental illness problem, no thank you, don't want you.
Is your character aware, consciously, that he is suffering from a mental illness as such, or does he just think he needs to pull himself together and he's just not coping?
Thinks something, that's a very good way of putting it. He thinks something's wrong and he needs to pull himself together. He needs to get a grip of himself.
Yeah.
So he doesn't understand.
And when he's got when his wife is saying to him, look, it's not right that you should be having these dreams at night. It's not right that you should be waking up in night sweats. It's not normal that you should be lashing out at me during your sleep. And he's saying to her, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Just give me space and
I'll sort it out. Yeah.
And he's reluctant, and it's. I mean, I go through the whole rigmarole of his inner turmoil that he suffers before he eventually accepts that. And it is only at the end of book 2 that we'll reach the point where he accepts, I need to do something about this. He suffers, for example, with hypervigilance. He's started to check his house, check his car for bombs, things like that. His reaction is far out of proportion to the threat against him. And his best mate says, look, you need to get help. You need to get help. And he's saying, no, I'm fine, it's you that's wrong. You should be checking under your car.
So he's kind of convinced himself of the more extreme issues.
So as a reader, you get to watch his gradual deterioration in judgment,
As a reader, does your book give any insight into how his friends and family, into a way that they can actually help him see that he needs to get help? So if I read that and think, oh God, that rings so true, and I know somebody like this, and I need to help them.
You'll be able to follow the methods that they use
Okay.
to help him, to persuade him, the things that they go to, the professionals that they go to seek advice, and then come back to him and say, look, I've spoken to this consultant at Bart's Hospital, and he says this is what's wrong with you, and you're having these kind of symptoms, and this is what you should be doing. They send him away on holiday, to give him a chance to relax and things like that. And one of the things he's aware of in himself, that he's suffered a complete sense of humour loss. And he only notices when he goes away on holiday, which he's reluctant to do, doesn't want to holiday on his own. But when he's there and he's relaxing, somebody cracks a funny and he laughs. And he sort of says, I can't remember the last time I laughed. And he thinks this through himself. He's thinking these thought processes through himself. And what I'm hoping is, of course, people will read that and say, "Oh yeah, I relate to that." It's interesting because I've had a couple of reviews from people who've written on that well-known site about the book, and have said, I thought this was a great story, but I can't believe an ex-SAS soldier who's become a cop could have exercised such bad judgment. And that is the point.
But when it comes to mental health, there's no rationality, there's no logic to how the brain can work. Because we listened to, I forgot his name, Dean Burnett this morning, and it was all about the brain and how we assume that the brain is this infallible, perfect thing, and when something goes slightly awry, there's something wrong, and then you panic because you don't know how to deal with it, rather than saying the brain is fallible. These things will happen.
But what he was also saying was we have a massive conflict in our brains between what he refers to as the reptile brain, the primitive brain that deals with autonomic responses, and now a very sophisticated, technologically savvy brain. So with something like PTSD, he said, what happens when you're in that state of heightened emotion and fight or flight is that your senses are on high alert. So every single stimulus is creating memory, and it's a really strongly formed memory because it's involving every single sense, etc. And then what happens is, because it's so vivid, it keeps coming back to the foreground of your brain and re-triggering the same stress responses that you had at that time, and that is the essence of post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah, that you're reliving that same moment because the sort of primitive part of the brain has got a bit caught in a sort of perpetual loop of
I read a fantastic book called The 7 Sins of Memory by a chap called Daniel Shachter, which talks about very similar sort of analysis of the brain and how it works.
Yeah.
And his theories were quite similar.
Yeah.
On a separate note, you read reviews?
I read them all.
Do you?
I read them all, and
do you respond to them all?
No, of course not. I don't respond, but I do take heed of them, and I include critical reviews in that as well, because I'm not so arrogant as to believe I can't learn.
Yeah,
exactly.
And when readers make a comment about something, for example, if they say, "Oh, I didn't understand why this character did this, it just didn't make sense to me," I'll look back and I think, actually, maybe I could have made that clearer. Maybe I will address that in the future.
Yeah,
so
it's weeding out the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
I mean, you can separate the nonsensical reviews, the vindictive. There's the odd vindictive review. You sometimes get jealous reviews.
Jealousy, that's what I was going to say.
You've got to try and look at the motivation behind it. But I mean, when I very first started, I self-published. The book was subject to a critical review, a lengthy critical review by one guy. And my first reaction was horror, how dare he? But then I stopped and reread it, and I thought, she's got some very valid points. And I'm very glad I did, because what happened then was I took his advice. And here I am now as a result of that. And it really is as a result of taking his advice. I pulled the book off of Amazon, I got it properly edited and proofread. I was amazed at how many errors they found. I put it back on Amazon. It did much better, and then it got picked up by an agent. That wouldn't have happened
Yeah.
if I hadn't read that negative review by that guy where he'd suggested that's what I should have done.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
I can't read them good or bad.
Yeah.
I get uncomfortable with the good ones. I get angry at the bad ones. I think it's an Irish thing. We are generally very poor at taking compliments.
Okay.
So there's been a couple of positive reviews. I tried to read a line or two of them. I get uncomfortable. I close it. I can't look at them positive or negative. I'm really counting on Legend Press and Lauren Parsons in Legend Press in particular to steer me in the right direction, because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to look at anything else except what she says.
I value reviews from readers more than I value reviews and comments from professionals, because I think within the industry there could be an agenda.
Yeah.
To what they're saying.
Yeah. At least it could be an honest review from the man on the street.
It could be a professional agenda as to why they're saying what they're saying. With readers, you get what they think. You know, if they're an independent, you've got no connection with them, and they're just putting what they think, regardless of whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And you hope that generally it's going to be good.
This makes so much sense. I'm going to have to start reading reviews.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
You can look at those and say, if they liked it, I'm getting something right. And I find at times where I'm in a low point, a low ebb with regards to writing, and a nice positive review will come through, gives you a bit of a shot in the arm. Gives you a bit of a shot in the arm. Yes. Right.
Okay, should we move on to Dan's absolutely awful, terrible book, No One Buy It, because he doesn't like positive reviews, so I'm sure it's going to be one of the worst things I've ever read. And we have a guy who lives with some of his different personalities, and he feels that they're real, and he lives with them in his house and they're in his head. How does he kind of cope with the world, and how does his friends and family cope with him? What's the relationship like there?
So he's outside of the house. So he has obsessive compulsive disorder, and OCD generally occurs with a number of other mental health illnesses. It almost never occurs in isolation. There's always a number of other factors involved. So he has obsessive compulsive disorder, and outside the house that has manifested itself, and his friends see that, and his family sees that, and they see a man in trouble, and they want him to get help and to try and address the issue. What they don't see, but what the reader sees, is that inside the house his problems are so much deeper than you initially realise, because the housemates, which are variations of his personality, are monstrous. They're literally monstrous. They look like monsters.
But he literally lives on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, just with the monsters inside his head.
And in terms of writing, the challenge was to create, to make it very obvious from the word go that these are in his head, but make them believable as characters. So that as the story goes on, you engage with them as characters in their own right. So as it intensifies, as things get worse for Dennis, you kind of forget that this isn't the plaster, that this is Dennis is talking to himself here. This is Dennis dealing with Dennis, because you've started to identify, I hope, the monsters as characters in their own right, which happens with people with multiple personality disorders. Some of the personalities are so distinct. There's usually amnesia concurrent with it, because some of the personalities are so distinct and so separate that one of the personalities won't remember what was done.
Have you read the book Sybil?
No.
Read the book Sybil.
That's
about her fragmented personality.
I read it now. What I was afraid of at the time was a whole bunch of people started suggesting books to me, and I got this paranoid feeling like, don't do it. Now this has to be just yours. So now,
That's yours.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, because I mean, reading other people's work does influence you, and it can take you off at a tangent in a way that perhaps you didn't want to go. And I'm very circumspect about other works and other things that I read. The vast majority of my reading is non-fiction, research work.
Yeah. If you're interested in a subject, and I agree with you, I think when you're writing, you do kind of need to avoid other things in that genre. But if you're interested in that issue, then because it's a true case. It's not a fictional account. It's a woman in America quite a long time ago. I'm going to say 40s. It's a long time since I've read the book. And multiple personality disorder was not really something that anybody was really aware of. And she had loads. It was something like, I want to say 12, but I mean, enormous number of personalities.
Well, I just watched M. Night Shyamalan's film Split, and obviously it's fictionalised, but the character has something like 27 personalities, I think.
Yeah, 23 different.
Well, yeah, something like that, and it's absolutely amazing. And he goes to see like a therapist or something, and she's saying that some of the not in this particular character, but in other cases, where some of the split personalities speak a foreign language, but the original person doesn't, or they'll write left-handed, whereas the original person writes right-handed.
That was the bit that really, really got me in terms of looking at the research into it. Some of the personalities can be left-handed and some of them right-handed.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Was it really difficult to write?
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly challenging.
It was tough, and there was a lot of incongruity between the personalities as the book went on. I found sharper definitions for them, which meant I had to go back to the start, because by the time I reached the end and I had fully defined the first draft stuff, but I fully defined who the plaster character is, then some of the stuff he said in the first chapter doesn't make any sense. He would never say that. Because
it's not like you were writing a case study.
No.
And describing a case study of something.
And
you had to create this.
Yeah. And
this is imaginary.
Yeah.
Are the voices still talking to you?
As authors, we have voices in our head, don't we? If we're completely alone and our minds are quiet, there's something going wrong.
After it came out, like a bunch of guys at work who had read it, meeting people and work and encountering people, and do you need to talk, Dan?
Yeah. Is this a personal account of your own life?
Something you want to share with us? No, I'm fine, thank you.
It sounds incredibly creative. Incredibly creative.
Sometimes if I wanted to freak them out, I'd say, no, we're fine. We're okay.
So same question that I asked Matt. Through the reader's journey through the book, if I think I've identified somebody who I think may have multiple personality disorder, would I learn how to recognise that, how to deal with that, what to do? It's less about what you would do next, because one of the central themes for the whole story is that no one else can make someone with a mental health problem better. No,
so one of the central themes of the whole thing was how, and I would hope that some people would be able to identify with the kind of powerlessness of dealing with a friend or a family member who has a mental health disorder, because you can't make them better. You can't
force them to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah,
and if they don't think they're unwell, if they just go, oh no, I'll get over it, I'm fine, then they're not going to be aware of the help there is.
Until Dennis kind of reaches that moment himself, and I won't spoil it by saying he does or doesn't, but unless he reaches that moment, there is no hope for him to get better, because the steps you can, and it's kind of one of the important parts of it, is that the family and friends he has in the story are magnificent. They're almost artificially nice, because the intention had been to provide this character with the most fantastic support network imaginable if he cared to access it, but he doesn't, and that was the idea, is that he has isolated himself so entirely that unless he takes that step.
Does he know he's ill?
No, not as such, and that was one of the most tremendously fun parts in terms of writing it. They know. The other personalities know.
Right.
He doesn't know.
So they try to control him, and
they offer. There's a couple of moments where he feels that something is one of the personalities will say something threatening or mean to him, and he'll feel that something is wrong, and they hint at it. They're like, yeah, go on, explore that, dig in there, and see what that means to you. And he immediately shies away from that because he doesn't want to understand. That's the whole reason he created them, is that he didn't want to understand or cope with his problems. So they know, but he doesn't. Which is
you may have to edit this bit, but if that was a crime author writing that, at the end you'd discover that Dennis wasn't the real character.
That is an M. Night Shyamalan twist, isn't it? At the end,
there is not a twist at the end. But the last line in the book is something of a
Thought provoker?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
good.
Don't look.
No, don't look. No, don't look.
it's so yeah, it's not quite on that level, but it's there is a head scratcher in it. Right at the end, my brother sent me a tirade of abuse when he finished it, because that last line absolutely ruined his interpretation of the entire book. So yeah, I got a tirade of abuse from my brother over that, which I was delighted about.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Okay, so we are running out of time because it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I think mental health is something we do need to talk about. It's something that's still shied away from, which is so frustrating, because mental health is just as debilitating as physical health. And
somebody we listened to recently said that the statistics are that 1 in 4 people suffer from some form of mental health issue, and went on to say, and I don't think, I think it's actually more than that, and I agree with that. I think in their lifetime, most people will suffer some kind of mental health issue, even if it is a controllable bout of depression that comes and goes. Yeah. I mean, I too suffer from depression, and
you've got the medication that helps you with that, and you've got medication that helps you with diabetes, and you've got medication that helps you with cancer. You've got medication and therapy and help that you can access, and I think it's just so important.
One of the things that I found with the PTSD, which, as I said earlier, is a depressive type illness, was the concept of feeling low, feeling miserable, because I didn't. And I think many men, they fail to get diagnosed because depression manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah,
as irritability, as anger, as
frustration,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those I did have. And it was only when I was with this counsellor, and she and the GP were trying to persuade me to go on antidepressants, and I was very resistant, because once that's on your medical record, that's there.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be.
The stigma was going to stick, and I didn't want to. And she explained it to me in the terms of saying that depression isn't feeling low. Depression means your brain efficiency is depressed. It's lowered.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you feel low. It doesn't mean you feel miserable. It just means your brain is not working efficiently as it should be.
Yeah.
And when she explained it in those mechanical terms, and she talked to me about the highly adrenalised life that I was leading, and the way that adrenaline affects serotonin, the way that serotonin levels then drop in response to these constant high levels of adrenaline that you have in your system. When she explained those mechanics to me and what was going on, and why my decision-making processes weren't smooth, why my thoughts weren't smooth, why I was getting these funny dreams, why I was getting flashbacks, and it all started to make sense, I agreed to go on the antidepressants. And
but
for me,
you need to be able to talk about it, and
they worked.
Yeah.
There's one thing that not one, there's so many different things that annoy me about the stigma surrounding it, but one of the standout ones is this idea that depressed people, or people suffering from depression, are like incapable of happiness.
Yes.
You've got to be kidding me, like.
The amount of comedians that suffered with depression, is just...
I wasn't unhappy.
Yeah.
I wasn't unhappy. But I was irritable. I was short-tempered. Those things were there.
Well, as Ruth was saying, the girl that she was probation officer to, she said she wasn't depressed. She didn't have any clue that she'd be suicidal. She was bubbly and fun. I think, yes, so we are all the time.
And people say, "Oh, we didn't realise you were depressed." That's because it's not. It's not a misery.
It's not misery.
No,
it is not what you think it
something
is.
about that title. That the talk today was in aid of. And it was, I forget what it was, but it was campaign against living miserably.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that title, because living miserably is not depression. I wasn't miserable.
No.
But then some people are, and I think you can't pinpoint it because mental health affects people differently. So I do I get what you're saying, but it's how do you broadly say, campaign against living happily, but sometimes feeling a bit down, and sometimes feeling a bit irritated, and sometimes feeling you can feel a bit depressed. It's okay, but you might be happy. That's the acronym is just going to go on for hours.
Where do we define it? Where is it's so hard to put a line around it and go, that's it. Anything inside here is it.
Yeah. And that's why I think we need to keep talking about it and saying it's okay if you don't tick all of these boxes. We can still help you,
miserable
or you can
encompass more than just feeling low.
Well, again, it's changing as well. It's fluid, because Jean Burnett was saying this morning that They used to think that antidepressants boost serotonin levels, which is what, because it's a drop in serotonin that causes depression.
Mm.
But technically, in that case, the moment you take a pill of serotonin, you should immediately feel better, and it doesn't. It takes 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, mine took about 6 weeks for it started
for the pills to take effect. And he said they're now thinking that actually what the serotonin does is create an environment where something more complicated,
something sciencey,
science happens, which enables you to change the way your brain functions. So they, it's constantly changing how they understand what depression is in terms of neuroscience. So in terms of actually expressing that to the layperson, I guess that's a minefield as well, isn't it? But as long as we're talking about
it, who's resistant to wanting to go on pills, I'm taking them.
Yeah,
right? Nothing wrong with me. I don't need to take pills.
See, since I've been taking my antidepressants, I say to everybody, take antidepressants, take them, you'll feel so much better. But we'd like to thank you ever so much, and like I say, we could talk to you for ages.
Yes,
the time is counting 26 minutes, and I'm thinking, we normally have.
So we might have to edit this down.
But no, it's been absolutely fascinating,
brilliant.
and very much looking forward to reading all about these monsters and everything.
Totally.
So absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much, and all the best for your future endeavours.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Very nice
you.
to meet you.